Hello once again, my dearest friends. Well, we're back once again with another thoughts on video, and this one, like a previous one I've done before, is for a bit of an oldie. Or to be a bit more specific, it's for 3 oldies in fact. For you see, my friends, today we are talking about the return of Crash friggin' Bandicoot. Now, I've let it slip before that Crash 1 was pretty much my introduction to video games, and that is pretty much true in terms of me seeing video games for the first time. As to playing them, it's hard to kind of make a judgment as to what would be kind of as my first one ever. There could have been some very easy, like educational games that could count as video games. I'm sure you won't count those and stuff. But I'll tell you right now, whenever I think of what my first experience with video games are, Crash Bandicoot is pretty much always right there at the forefront. And it's funny because I saw it at such a young age that there were just so many visual things that I misinterpreted until a few years later, where I had my own copy of the game with my PS1, that I started to realise, some things are a little different from how I imagine them being from before. Like, for example, some characters that I thought were female turned out to actually be male, apparently. So, that was a bit of a shocker. But let me just say this right now, that I really do have so much nostalgia for these 3 games. Plus with Crash Team Racing, of course, which sadly isn't with this collection we have right now, but I have a feeling that it's quite possible we might end up getting a remastered version of that game as well, possibly. I'm going to go ahead and say, considering the fact that this trilogy has sold pretty well, that it's a good chance we very much might. I'm pretty sure we will. So those who don't know, Crash games were originally worked on by Naughty Dog, who certainly hold a bit of relevance today in the video game industry. And as years have gone on, of course, the Crash has still kind of had games come out, of course worked on by different developers, and needless to say, there've been some okay ones here and there, but none of them have certainly really ever managed to capture the same magic as those original 3. And I mean, a big part of that is probably the fact that Crash really is a 90s centered character, and he just they haven't really found a way to really move him forward, I feel like, a bit more. I mean, Mario, of course, manages to change things up, and then he goes for different art styles, different kind of things to this all. And Sonic, while certainly has had quite a few down points, you know, and by down points I mean massive down points, he's managed to, as well, I feel like, transfer a bit better. Not perfect to be sure, you know, but still a bit better. And I only say this because I feel that this recent trilogy to come out is really what the Crash series needed. It really needed us to remind us of why we really love Crash, why we really love these levels and stuff, why we really love these really kind of wacky, kind of imaginative world that, I will be honest, I do think really does separate it from all these other mascot platformers. You know, there is something very weird and stuff about it all, and that's one of the things that I just really love about it back then, and I still do today. The first game starts off with Crash being created, or at least being transformed from a simple Bandicoot to this kind of oddly shaped kind of human-sized marsupial, who it's created by Dr. Neocortex and Dr. Embryo, and he ends up, he apparently is supposed to be the general for their new mutant creature army, which definitely does seem a bit weird why they'd want him of all things. I mean, you've got all these different kind of animals, and you say, no, it's the Bandicoot that is the greatest of all of them. It's a bit odd for that, but either way though, Crash manages to resist their control and ends up escaping. Of course, his girlfriend is accidentally left behind, and so it's pretty much you just washing up on shore and just making your way from island to island, all the way back up to Cortex's castle, and eventually saving your girlfriend. The story for Crash 2, Cortex Strikes Back, very much follows just directly right after Crash 1, with Cortex finding a new power source, these crystals, and he realised that he can continue taking over the world if he can find 25 of them, which he has Crash go out and collect for him, which certainly is a bit of a weird thing where Crash just goes along with it, you know. Cortex teleports into a room, he says, hey, the Earth's about to die, we need to stop this, find me these crystals. No questions asked, no other questions asked, because it's kind of shown quite a bit often that Crash is not the smartest hero out of the bunch, and I honestly would have loved it if they actually did maybe insert a bit where Cortex was like, Crash, would you kindly get all 25 crystals for me? Just like, that would have been like, oh, okay, that's why. The third game, Crash Warped, kind of follows very similarly to Crash 2, with this time Crash and his sister Coco having to team up to go through time and collect 25 more crystals. I mean, to be honest, it could very easily be the original 25 that we picked up from the last game, and we're just picking up from an earlier time. But either way, though, it doesn't really matter, I guess. But we're having to basically collect 25 more crystals while competing against Cortex, who is now teamed up with his master, the evil shaman master, Uka Uka, who is sort of a counterpart to Crash and Coco's magical masker, Aku Aku. So let me just say that visually, this game really is just beautiful. You know, it's granted, it is kind of just a paint job over a game that's for 3 games that came out roughly 20 years ago, but still, there is just something just so makes me so giddy and stuff seeing these games more modernized, and they really do work in that respect. Just how there is just, for one thing, we've got more polygons this time, so you know we don't have to just see the little jagged edges of things like Crash and stuff like that. And yeah, there's just overall just like so much more color added to it all and stuff. One thing that I know for sure I've really just admired a lot from this game is the animation used throughout. I love, of course, the little idle animations Crash will make and stuff, the movement, the death animations. One thing that I think the big point of it was how the faces are animated stuff, particularly Cortex and his other lot and stuff like that, because whenever it sort of like has Cortex in Crash 2 sort of speaking to you, there's just something so like lovely about just seeing him sort of like move his face around and stuff like that. And it's I really have to congratulate Vicarious Vision for how well they've done all this. There's something very just so polished about it all, and honestly I really couldn't really pick out any holes in it, you know. I've heard maybe a few bits here and there from some people, but honestly I'm not too bothered about it. In my opinion, they really has just managed to go throughout without me finding any problems visually wise. The only small thing I can really add to it, maybe in a problem visual wise, is how a lot of the animals, rather than them having their more cartoony eyes like they did originally, they just have kind of more like just kind of dotted eyes, really, which in some respects I'm like, okay, sure, whatever, but it's just, I don't know, I maybe prefer sort of the more cartoony eyes they sort of gave to them. And I will say it's a bit harder to jump on Polar now, knowing that he's just got these little tiny eyes rather than his sort of cartoony ones before, so it kind of doesn't really make me want to jump on him as much, though I kind of still will just to get those extra lives. Gameplay wise, the first Crash game is very simple with just a lot of jumping and spinning used throughout. The second game manages to bring in sliding, crawling and body slamming, which definitely was a bit of improvement in certain areas. And the third game then decided to bring in power-ups whenever you beat a boss, and also brought in a few more extra vehicle missions as well. Now, beyond the visual changes, there are actually a lot of things that gameplay-wise they have changed that have made these games a bit better in my opinion, particularly in the first one, because one thing you need to know about the first game is that it's very much been regarded as being the weakest out of the 3. And a big case of that is because the first one is not exactly easy by a lot of people's accounts. And a big case for that is the fact that you can't save after you've completed every level. You can only save after you've collected 3 tokens, or in a level, or you just so happen to have collected a gem at the end of it, so which isn't easy considering the fact that back in the original you had to not die and collect every box if you wanted to get a gem. So there's been a lot of really big changes that have really made this so much more of a fun experience for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people. So from now on, in the original Crash game, whenever you get the tokens in a bonus level, you don't die. You don't lose any lives if you fail in it, and you can retry it just like the bonus levels in Crash 2 and 3. So that's really, really good. And I think one of the things I really like about this is the fact that when you these bonus levels really are kind of your training segments in a way. These are where you can really kind of master your bouncing on blocks at the right time to get that extra boost, or angling yourself with the bouncy hard blocks. So I really enjoy the fact that they've really made these a lot more easier and stuff like that, and really do make them so much more fun for you. Now, on top of having those changes made to the first game, one change I really do enjoy is the fact that you can now play as Coco in every level in all 3 games, with the exception of ones that involve certain vehicles and involve bosses. Okay, so really any of the regular kind of Crash levels, you can now switch out for Coco before you start it, and gameplay wise, there is really no difference and stuff. She still spins like Crash, she jumps like Crash. She just like kind of carries around her laptop and stuff like that, which is a bit of a funny little bit about her and stuff like that. Despite the fact she's holding around a laptop and not like an iPad, I guess at this point, she still has her sort of doing selfies and stuff like that, which was a little bit maybe too modern for this kind of game, but whatever. But I really like her addition to it and stuff, and it really does kind of put up this whole team player brother and sister duo between Crash and Coco. I like. Another thing from Crash Warp that has been brought over are the time trials, which certainly are a nice extra thing for you to have for these games. I am curious to know like how they will play out for many completionists, those people who really want to get all the platinum relics. Other changes to note is that the music has been updated to fit in different kind of instruments and stuff like that, and there are some bits where maybe some people might be like they prefer the original version, and sadly you can't change back to the original tracks, unlike some other remakes where they let you do that. But overall, I still thought the music was still pretty good. It still got some good bits here and there and stuff like that. There were maybe one or two that maybe I think I preferred the original versions, and that could have been because of the more tone that was going with them. If I can put down a few cons for this game, I'll go ahead and say that I did think the loading times were maybe a bit long, which just a little bit of annoyance and stuff. Particularly the fact that while you can restart levels if you're doing time trials, because there are no checkpoints in them, so if you die in them, you'll just go back to the beginning. But if you are wanting to complete those coloured gem challenges in Crash 1 without dying, you're going to have to quit out the level and then go back into it if you want to try again, which was a little bit annoying, having to go back and have the loading screen and then go back in and have the loading screen. So that was maybe a bit of a small problem. Other than that, honestly enough, this game was a real pleasure to play. I was really happy to get to play these 3 adventures once again, and yeah, it really did make me feel like, hey, this is Crash. Crash is back, and I really hope they will continue things on with him. And like I said, I have a feeling that considering this has had some pretty good sales, we are going to see a real continuation with him. And who knows, maybe Activision will continue this on with another certain mascot character that came out at the same time, a certain Purple Dragon, perhaps, so please, bring Spyro back, please. We don't need him to be in this series with like 3 billion figures where he just sticks out very so slightly. He can come back and have his own series again, Activision, please. So thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for even more hot cross goodness. And you can check me out on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks again, guys, and hey, be seeing you around.